What's up everyone, Thralls here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick and I have an album review for you. So yet another one that came out on the 1st of April that I was super fucking stoked to go over was the latest offering from new wave of British heavy metal fucking underdogs, Satan, with their new album Earth Infernal. This comes out on Metal Blade Records. This band formed in 1979 in the UK. This is their 6th full-length under the Satan banner. They actually changed around their names, broke up, reformed. You know, a long history of this band. They were Blind Fury for a while, they were Pariah for a while, and then eventually came back to Satan, which is just a fun sentence to say, especially when talking about a metal band. I've always thought this band was super underrated. Their debut album, Court in the Act, is absolutely amazing. I would put it up on that same Mount Rushmore of NWOBHM that has, you know, Iron Maiden's Killers and Saxon's Wheels of Steel on it. I legit think that album rivals both of those in terms of just flat out catchiness and fucking killer riffs, almost sort of a precursor to thrash. This band is just flat out awesome, and since they've reformed, pretty much putting out albums since 2013 again as Satan, they have been putting out some of the best NWOBHM I have heard here recently, and this is coming from an old school band, and there's a huge revival thing with, you know, classic heavy metal. And these guys, in my opinion, still set quite a standard. And unlike a lot of other bands in terms of like the older guard, in terms of like heavy metal and such, I don't feel apprehensive about Satan releases. They've been killer so far, so there isn't like, I don't know, do they still have it? I pretty much know they still have it, and I was right from the opening track, Ascendancy. This album just takes off into killer riffs, great melodies. Brian Ross's vocals have aged like a fucking fine wine on here. He doesn't really go for the high register screams as much, but he doesn't really need to. Like, he has this very comfortable range, and he sings so well. He's just delivering all of this with, I don't know, sort of a cool, like, evil flair to it. And that is kind of the thing that I love about this band, and once again is on full display on this album, is they don't come across as cheesy. Like, going over the latest Saxon album, while I absolutely love it, there is a fair amount of cheese. The lyrics are a little bit dated, you know, it's kind of their theme though. They really don't need to change. Satan always had like a darker appeal to them. There was a little bit more storytelling. There was less of the heavy metal tropes about let's wear leather and wear more leather. We're staying out late tonight past curfew because we're rebels. Look, a motorcycle. Anyway, Satan has always kind of appealed to the darker side, and I really like that. It's almost doom metal in attitude and themes, but classic heavy metal all throughout in terms of the style. Songs like Poison Elegy absolutely embody this. It kind of has this creepy crawling riff that starts, and there is sort of a sinister feel to it, but the melodies are very triumphant and very just huge. And there's a lot of just instantly infectious choruses and melodies on here. But again, with that sort of like doomy attitude to it, like instead of going for that triumphant high register, you know, big chorus moment, they like to bring it back down and kind of bring it down to the darkness and the depths very often. And I really like that. It keeps the feel of this album kind of dark and sinister while still being just a fuck ton of fun to listen to, because the riff work, the guitar work, everything in terms of the guitar work is just fucking awesome. Russ Tippins and Steve Ramsey, you can just tell that these guys have been fucking playing off of each other for years. They just kind of know how to complement one another. The lead trade-offs are great, the harmonies are great, the riffs are very creative too. They don't necessarily just follow all the NWOBHM tropes. Like, of course you have your harmonies and just big epic riffs that just scream like, again, classic Iron Maiden, Saxon, Angel Witch, Diamond Head, all of those bands. But you also have stuff that is more akin to almost thrash metal, and the combination of notes is sometimes a little bit more like atonal and weird. Like, there's a little bit of this band that reminds me of Voivod. They kind of always have. Like, they don't necessarily follow like the big melodic hooks in terms of like the natural chord progression. They kind of get a little bit weirder, but they still generate a really cool hook. A good example of that is A Sorrow Unspent. It kind of builds up with, you know, a more acoustic melody and bongos, which the bongos actually work really well, and it builds up the energy really well, and you get this really kind of thrashy hook, but it's, again, kind of strange and almost kind of punky. And again, that kind of gives me the Voivod impression, but God, this song just builds really well, and it just hooks you in with amazing melodies across the board. The guitars, the bass line to the opening is really fucking fun, and of course the vocal melodies. But the thing that I really love about pretty much all of these songs is the bridges. The bridges, they just love to take for a walk and just kind of comb the entire fucking riff farm for cool melodies and hooks and lead trade-offs, harmonies. It just really seems like the band just completely cuts loose on the bridge. 12 Infernal Lords has an absolutely amazing bridge riff, and it leads into, again, epic harmonies. And I feel like I'm going to say a lot of the same shit about all these bridges because they all kind of do the same thing except in a different way. Like, they just kind of have fun with it. And then it gets right back to, you know, the verses or the chorus, whatever they choose to go into after that, and it does it all very seamlessly. This album flows really well, one track after the other, and it just keeps hitting you with killer melodies. And not a lot of it kind of ran together. Like, a lot of this is just, you know, the next song is a little bit different than the last one, and you get like some different distinct harmonies or a more distinct chorus. And I think that makes the album a bit more engaging just because you get a lot of different stuff. Songs like Burning Portrait and, again, Poison Elegy both have like kind of very classic metal, classic rock-ish choruses. Actually, the chorus on Poison Elegy really reminds me a lot of Deep Purple, and there's a lot of nods to like proto-metal bands too. I mean, of course, you have like sort of the Black Sabbath sort of like feel and sort of atmosphere to this, but there's a lot of like Thin Lizzy on here too. And that's just one more level of enjoyment because I love both of those bands too. But the thing on here just across the board is this band does not sound like a bunch of guys in their 50s, 60s, and almost 70s. Brian Ross is 68 years old, and his vocal cords sound like they're probably about 35. Like, he sounds really good on here. And the guitar work is very creative. Again, they're not just kind of playing like the same sort of like basic riffs and such that you would come to expect from an older band. Like, they're still trying to find new clever melodies and really push themselves. But at the same time, really holding on to this old school aesthetic. Like, this is a fiercely 80s sounding album, but this is a band from the 80s, so what would you expect? But the thing that really kind of cements it is the production. Now, a lot of, you know, older bands, it kind of rely on that more Andy Sneap-ish production, which is not a dig against Andy Sneap. I do like his production, but I kind of hear it too much, and there's not a variety in terms of like how he mixes stuff. Like, once you've heard one Andy Sneap mix, you kind of have heard all of them. Satan went with a far more analog sounding old school approach, and honestly, that makes it even more appealing for me because the whole sound of it sounds like a band just jamming out the songs live in the studio. Everything kind of has like a little bit of like an analog hiss to it. The guitars sound a little bit dirty and a little bit squawky at times, but not in like a bad way. It actually sounds like, again, you're sitting there in the studio listening to these guys jam. And the drums, while they are a little bit loud in the mix, they sound like they're being played right in front of you. And again, I kind of like this old school aesthetic. Like, this reminds me a lot of like Killers in terms of like, you know, old school heavy metal albums that flat out fucking rip. And I have to say the pacing on this album is really good. You get the whole peaks and valleys sort of effect. You get like thrashy barn burners like The Blood Runs Deep, which is immediately infectious. I love the chorus. It's essentially them repeating the song title and then saying a line afterwards, but holy shit, it's just catchy as hell. And then the last track, Earth We Bequeath, is very Dio-ish. In fact, if you slapped Dio's vocals on there instead of Brian Ross's, you would have a flat-out Dio song, like kind of like last in line sort of epicness, but it takes a hard turn into like more sinister, chuggy territory towards the bridge and just fucking rips. They even throw a cool breakdown in that last track, which has this really cool sleazy sort of rock and roll riff, but then there's also some like dissonant riffs that kind of, you know, complement it as well. And they give you the big finish, like the big live show finish, which again, just sort of encapsulates the whole vibe of this album. As far as any negatives about this, I don't have many complaints. I think the drum work, you know, is solid. It kind of stays right in the pocket. It's in a nice, comfortable spot. Could have used a little bit more variety, but honestly, what he's doing is not hurting the songs whatsoever. And again, this is more driven by the guitars and the melodies, but I mean, the rhythm section here is solid. And I mean, I guess you could say it's very similar to their last three, Cruel Magic, Life Sentence, Atom by Atom, but those were all killer. So that isn't really a knock either. They're kind of at a point where they really don't need to change their sound because honestly, they sound kind of unique compared to a lot of new wave of British heavy metal bands that are still around. They've carved out this niche of being the dark, sinister, spooky version of like Iron Maiden and Saxon. And honestly, I wouldn't want to change. They fucking nail that sound. It's fucking absolutely awesome. So overall, I'm gonna give this 4.5 stars. Man, I fucking love Satan. And the band too. This is an absolutely incredible fucking album. I love the melodies on here. The songs are just brimming with energy. The bridges, holy shit, they have so much fun on the bridge. I just don't hear a lot of bands do that as much anymore. The lead trade-offs are great. The vocals are great. Again, this doesn't sound like an old band. This sounds like a young band that's still fucking hungry and just creatively pushing themselves. The fact that this is more like dark and sinister but still has all the tropes of like classic heavy metal in terms of like the leads, the harmonies, it makes it a more engaging listen, at least for me, because I want to listen to dark, sinister shit because it's mostly pretty damn cool. Everything I love about Satan is on display here. The amazing melodies, the more dark, sinister, foreboding atmosphere to it, the fact that the lyrics are more like dark storytelling versus just, you know, like heavy metal tropes and shit. All this is done and it's so fucking catchy. Like legit every song on here is catchy as hell. There's even an instrumental on here and it is not a waste of space at all. It is yet another awesome catchy collection of riffs. I would really have to search for a reason to not like stuff in this album because honestly they just do everything I like about classic heavy metal right here. If you are not familiar with this band, literally go get any of their releases. They're all really good. The debut Court in the Act is absolutely amazing, but honestly these last 4 albums now have been flat out incredible, and if you haven't checked out any of those, I strongly recommend them. Pretty much if you like your classic heavy metal just a little bit evil, this is the fucking band for you. So again, urge you to check these guys out. Go check out all their shit because it's all fucking awesome. So, if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there will be a link down below, and there will also be a link down below to thrallsmetal.com where you can order one of our shirts if you would like. As always, thank you all so much for subscribing, following, commenting, all that stuff. You guys are the reason why we love this so much. I mean, we already loved metal to begin with, but we met all of you guys, and you guys fucking rule. I mean, you're at least cooler than us, and that's not saying a tremendous amount. But anyway, we love you guys, and thank you so much, and we will catch you later.